Hi, my name is June O'Sullivan and I'm welcoming you to our lunchtime webinar. So you're having your tea, your sandwich, your orange, should you wish one, because we're all into healthy eating here. And the best bit of this is Ben. And Ben is our head of L&D, which is our academy at LEYF, and he delivers all of our training, designs, delivers, and does lots and lots of research as well. We know that a lot of people worry about pedagogy. We know that the word worries them and the whole idea worries them, but actually it's not that complex. I expect we can make anything complicated, to be frank, but actually we're trying to make this quite easy. And so we've been talking about pedagogy since about 2008. I was looking back at my notes. I know, I've been in this game too long, I think. Anyway, and we've been kind of consistent with it, and we've developed, in fact, a whole pedagogy for LEYF. It's a kind of social pedagogy because we're a social enterprise. It's here. And we will do whole webinars on each element of it in time, but today we're just going to focus really on what we understand by pedagogy and really just unpacking that. For those of you who don't know what we do, we are the largest childcare social enterprise in the UK. And so our whole sort of raison d'etre is to set up nurseries that are amazingly good for all children, but particularly very good for children from poorer and disadvantaged families. And that means we have a fee structure that helps us to subsidize those, because, without getting caught up in the treacle of funding, we all know that's insufficient. But also we have a pedagogy that's designed to take account of all of that. The new sort of term around that now is the cultural capital. But we've been talking about cultural capital for a long time, and we won't actually muddy the water today, but it is built into our pedagogy. But perhaps one day we'll do a whole webinar on cultural capital, because I know a lot of you are worried about that, particularly as Ofsted have sort of taken it on as one of their kind of ideas. And as the new inspections roll out, I think people will feel more at ease, I think, about that process if they can recognize what cultural capital looks like for them and their settings, and whether you're a childminder or preschool, it doesn't, how it's reflected. But today, it's tea, sandwich, and pedagogy. I'm going to start by asking Ben, what is pedagogy?
Oh, June. First of all, it's a word that lots of people struggle to say. However, it's in its most simplest terms, and that's what we try to do at LEYF, is keep things really straightforward. We try and get our teachers, our parents, and even our children to understand that pedagogy, when we say it, we mean leading to learn. So it's how we lead learning. So it's pretty much everything that we do, from the minute the children walk in the door to the minute that they go home. So those care routines, the songs that we sing, the interactions that we make, every decision that we as a teacher have made to lead an element of learning is a pedagogical decision.
And if you want to develop your own pedagogy, which is absolutely fine, I mean, the framework we all work within is the DYFS, and I know that kind of gets criticised, and they're reviewing it at the moment. I've never been one for actually reviewing it, because I think it's in its structure, it's perfectly helpful. However, if you just lock it into only that, then you are probably limiting yourself. So when we talk about pedagogy at LEYF, EYFS is already sort of taken account of, and it's kind of reshaped. But if you were to think about what do you need to do to have a pedagogy, what structures need to be in place to develop your pedagogy, there are really, I would say, 4 elements of this. And then the very, very first one is you need to understand your values and your principles. What is it that makes you tick? What are really important? And I'm going to ask Ben to sort of talk about this in the LEYF context in a minute. The second thing is you have to understand what education is for and the theory that really influence you. We don't really have conversations in the country at the moment, even though we're having an election, about what is education about. We lock it into the more practical translation of that. Should we have baseline assessment? Should we, the funding be more? But nobody steps back and thinks, well, what is it we want the children to benefit from in terms of education?
What is the point of education?
And what is our philosophy around it? So that's the second thing. So you first start with your values and your principles, and the second thing you start thinking about what is the purpose of education and who are these great educationalists and pioneers and modern alive people who really influence your work. The third thing is you have to think about the child in all of this. What is your perspective of the child? Is it the kind of Vygotskian idea that's an apprentice, learning and watching you? Or is it somebody like the, Reggio Emilia, Carolina Rinaldi notion of, explorers, curiosity, investigators? And then finally, it's how do we understand and what do we understand about how do children learn and how do we teach?
Yeah.
And they are the 4 elements of pedagogy. And, when you're defining your own and wherever you are, whatever, your rural setting or your sort of charitable setting or social enterprise setting, whatever it is, you need to answer those 4 questions because they are the critical thing. So if we go back to Ben, and so going to go through each of those, then the first thing would be the values.
Yeah, so at LEYF we have 4 values that we run throughout our central office all the way through to all of the training that we do. And we share this with parents, and the 4 values that we have are brave, because we recognise that when you work with children you have to be brave. We promote action research and questioning and evaluating and reflecting what we do, because we want to make sure what we do is fit for the children that we work with. And we often say at LEYF, it's about recognising the child of today. And that's why June was alluding earlier to, not leaning too heavily on some of the pedagogical greats from 100 years ago, because the children that Montessori or Margaret the Macmillan sisters working with are not necessarily the same children that we work with today. And the problems that children face today are, very different. So it's important that you stay current. And to do that, you need to, like June said, really drill down on your view of the child and the child that you teach in the moment. So brave is definitely an important one. The second one is inspire. And I think that's one of my favourite things about being a teacher, is as soon as those children open the door and come in, you can tell, even when you watch someone else's setting, the way a child enters that nursery or that classroom, whether that child knows they're about to be inspired or not. And they come in and they're jumping up and down, they're excited to just hang their coat and get into the room. That's because that teacher, their key worker, that setting, they're obviously working hard to produce an environment, provocations, things that excite the children, that motivate them, that make them, want to explore. And that's our job, I think, as teachers, is making our children ask questions, not answer them, and wanting to explore and find out. The next one we have is nurturing. And nurturing also is obviously important. And again, where the values run throughout the organisation, is to do with how our teams nurture each other and the staff, how our organisational, our ethos about nurturing staff well-being. And then obviously from the child and the family's point of view, as a social enterprise, some of the families that we support and work with, they actually need a lot of nurture.
Oh, golly, yes.
And it's part of our job, is not just teaching children, but actually working with those families, developing those partnerships.
And also that nurturing thing, just to cut across you for a second, is very much about, there's at the moment there's a kind of lack of confidence, I think, in the sector about understanding the kind of notion of what is care and what is education.
Yeah.
What does that mean? And I think the nurturing is, yes, exactly. And many of you will have read the work of Tina Bruce, but I remember back then, it must have been in 2010, when we began to really explore what is care and what is education. And actually there is no way you can't divide the two. And so whether you're changing a nappy or whether your child has fallen over or whether you're encouraging them to look after their friends or whatever it is, the way you care about them is so critical. Yet at the moment, there's a lack of confidence about caring and education as two are one, but actually we know they're actually completely interwoven.
And I think where people get confused by that, June, is where they're led down the assessment path.
Ah, yes.
Because the first question we said is, what is the point of education? What is it we're trying to achieve? And if you're driven by results and data, then you might be driven by targets and achieving the early learning goals, for example.
Yes,
but
that's true.
If you're driven by that, then you're actually missing the whole point. And so if you've got that mindset, then actually you probably are separating. Oh, this is just keeping the children safe, feeding them, keeping them clean. Now I'm going to do some teaching.
Yeah.
And it shouldn't be like that at all.
No.
But I think that's part of the reason people lean one way or the other.
Sure.
Is they become,
And then the final.
Obviously, the fourth, of course, there's 4. The fourth value at LEYF, which is my favourite, is fun. And it's fun for our staff, fun for our children.
Yeah.
And if our staff aren't enjoying what they do, then chances are the children aren't either. No. And that's why we're quite confident at LEYF. If something's not working, we're going back to the brave one, try it, see if it works. If it doesn't, don't worry, you're not going to be criticised for trying something new. And if it turns out to be really fun and engaging and exciting, then do it again the next day, add to it. But fun is really important. You want everybody to be having fun.
Yes, and so I mean, these are our values. There's nothing wrong with, you know, these are what we came up with. It doesn't mean that they're, you know, either the perfect values, they're right or they're wrong. And you may have completely different ones. It doesn't actually matter. In the end, when you're shaping your pedagogy, you're thinking about what matters. You're thinking what matters for your own children and how you will translate them. But the one thing that's very interesting though about values is it can't be just like a nice, you know, like some of the shops you go, or a poster in the wall, or an advert. And you think, hang on a second, did you say respect was one of your values? And you've just talked to me like that. I don't think so. And so we kind of look at that in terms of the staff performance, the staff support, the training, the contracts we go for as well. You know, if they're not going to align, they're going to limit us having fun because perhaps they're anxious about risk or something, then they're not going to work for us. And you don't have to have 4 either. It's just 4 work for us because it looks nice on the poster. But actually you could have, we used to have 5 C's. That was the thing at one point, 5 C's. They were all the same. And, you know, everything started with C. So they were actually much of a muchness, but we managed to say them in 5 C's. So again, you know, the first thing to start with pedagogy is you set out your principles and your values to what you want to achieve for those children, and then you frame everything in that. So therefore, how you then translate it in fun terms, for example, is like this morning I went to Soho Nursery, bless, to observe a play that the children have written with a theatre company, and it was all about process. So I know the early learning goals are talking a lot about performance, but actually in this case, it was about how those children actually formed the play making. And it was really hilarious because there was this kind of thing, you know, if you said they had learned key words that they loved, they were their words, they came up with it. So volcano, in the middle of this play, all about a unicorn getting stuck on the bridge because it was Bertie's birthday. There was no nativity at all this time. We haven't even entered Christmas yet. And it was like, and then every now and then the children would go, right, you've got to go volcano, run. And so it was really fun. But what was the experience? The experience at the end was kind of, you know, wasn't a pretty, you know, you couldn't say it was a coherent play, but the children's process and the way they stepped up, and the little child called Bruno, for example, who never would have spoken in front of anyone before, he was Tower Bridge. And, you know, he had made the Tower Bridge and they had the props that they'd all made. And honestly, it really built their confidence.
And in terms of characteristic effective learning, that's where you can observe those children who are trying something new, confident to communicate, the future leaders who can, you know, negotiate, oh, let's do this, let's do that, let's change the plot.
Yes. So there's
oh no, not yet. That's fine.
Okay, so we have to keep an eye on the other screen here in case somebody asks us a question. Please ask us a question because we'll get bored with each other after a while. So the second element then is, so start with your values. The next thing is, why are we educating children? Why is this old fixation on educating children? Because the policy at the moment tends to confuse. There's kind of 2 strands to it. One is to enable parents to go to work, and the other is to support what is often called the achievement gap, which is a whole other webinar, I have to say. But the idea being that, you know, early education can actually support children to develop. We wouldn't disagree with that at all. But they're quite different in terms of how they're perceived publicly about what is the point of education for children. Are you simply dropping them so they're safe and looked after? Are we actually educating them, and is there a purpose to what we're doing?
Yeah, definitely. And I suppose that's being a social enterprise. June alluded to the fact our pedagogy is a social pedagogy, and I think the reason that works for us at our organisation is it's about the holistic approach to education. So it's not about individual subjects. We see the child as a whole, we see the child as an individual, but it's also about the holistic journey of education. So instead of chunking it down into a term's progress or achieving the ELGs or a SATs result at the end of Key Stage 1, Key Stage 2, it's about that longevity that we see in these children and about them taking their role in society at the end of it. And when you keep that at your core, it really helps you to stay focused with what's important. And again, when it comes to why do we do what we do, what is the point of education? Is it to get them to sabotage? Or is it to get them to ask questions, to problem solve, to explore, to communicate, to be social?
Interesting, that word, sabotage. It's a while since I've heard that. There's a word for you guys, sabotage. You worry about pedagogy, wait till you start sabotaging. So for us, it's like, it's also about, you know, how how does it kind of translate into the reality of the day? So is it about the economic well-being of the children? So are we teaching them things that are going to make them suitable for work? Even though we know, I think it's 46% of jobs are yet to be discovered, are yet to be created.
Yeah.
So is it that? So are we filling them up as a potential economic kind of, unit? Is it because we have all these cultural norms that we want to have the children to absorb? Is it that this is the way we do things around here, and so
this is how I was educated, so this is how you would be educated.
Yes, exactly right. Yeah. Or is it, in the way you framed it, is it about the kind of well-rounded sort of citizen of the world kind of person? So that actually, for some things, social personal development will for us be much, much more of a factor than the obsession with reading, writing, and phonics, so to speak. And it's interesting, isn't it, that I think it's Finland just appointed a 34-year-old as as the prime minister, and she would have gone to school. She wouldn't have gone to school till she was 6, and she certainly wouldn't be doing her phonics till she was 6 or 7. Yet she's now prime minister of the country. So this whole kind of like, when you haven't got a philosophy about education, you get sucked into kind of policy and ideologies that are not actually framed in what's good for the children. And we see that because of
it's like
the
a
stress
treadmill.
level.
Everybody else is doing it. I need to do it because
absolutely.
otherwise, comparatively, my children aren't making the same progress.
Exactly
But
right.
actually, it's about stopping and saying, what progress am I measuring?
Yes.
What do I value?
Yes.
Am I obsessed with how many letters, whether they can recognise Sapin or whether they're ready to blend?
Yeah.
Or actually,
exactly.
do I like the fact they can invent their own games and they can
write their
find
own
their own
plays.
challenge? Yeah, exactly. Create a narrative.
Yeah.
And as a primary school teacher, I think that was one of the impacts. We did phonics at such an early age that we produced these children, particularly girls, who were very able writers, but had nothing to write about. And it was that idea that I'd rather we produce these children who can create and, come up with stories and plots and imaginations.
I think Greg Bottrell talked about this, doesn't he, when he talks about writing for messaging.
Teachers spend more and more time writing less and less.
Yeah.
I really like that phrase, actually.
Yes, it's that whole "can I go and play with you now" type thing, and what's the point of it? So I think that's a conversation to have in your staff room, and I do wonder when's the last time you sat down with fish, chips and Prosecco and actually had as a subject,
Pedagogy
what is
Prosecco.
Yeah. Well, we'd like to know what you put in your pedagogy cocktail. I have to say that is one of our challenges for you. So those of you who have got an idea about that, just drop us a line. I know Joseph has just got some questions coming up.
Yeah, there's a question if you want, I can read it out to you. Hi Ben and Jean, how do you apply the LEYF pedagogy in the outdoor nursery activities? So that indoor-outdoor.
What a brilliant question.
The first thing is that we don't see the indoor and the outdoor, they shouldn't be mirroring each other.
Oh, yes. So before we answer that question, let us just conclude on the other elements of pedagogy so we're coherent about what we're saying. So we've got the values and principles, we've got the rationale, the reason, the philosophy for why we educate children. The next thing is we've got the view of the child, which fits very beautifully into this. So how would you see that in answering that person's question about indoor-outdoor and our view of the child? How do we align that with the view of our view of the child?
Well, for us, again, some people have the idea that particularly young children, they're vulnerable, they're fragile, they're delicate, whereas at LEYF we're quite the opposite. We see them as bold, confident, and therefore able to learn. And I'm trying to get to the idea outdoor, so we promote risky play. Our children are outside every day regardless of the weather.
2 hours
2 hours at least. Constantly being taken out into the environment to meet the community that they share it with. But in terms of looking at how a child learns, so for us we recognize that many of our young children, they don't learn by sitting on the carpet or even sitting at a table. They actually learn by being active, by being able to move fast, move slow, climb high, crawl, all of those physical development, but also the way they choose to learn. We've done a really interesting piece of action research about boys particularly, and we've done our deputies have done a piece of research across all of the nurseries called #BoysOutside, but it's that idea of trying to address the fact that there was an achievement gap between our boys and girls. And when we look deeply at how boys' brains develop and the way they physically develop, we wanted to take some of that learning that happens inside, that often happens at a table, which I don't know why it just does, and take it outside to the sandpit, to the climbing frame, to the dinosaurs, to the den, to the nature trail. To the bike works, exactly. And if you're really following the children's interests, then that's where the teacher brings the objectives to the play and not the children to the objectives. So if you've got teachers who are confident in identifying children's next steps, then if you're truly following the children's interests, you can bring the learning and develop that next step wherever the children are. So indoor, outdoor, it makes no difference.
Yes, and we're very keen on gardening. I even wrote a book about it somewhere. It'll all fall down now here in a second. Because we noticed the difference between outdoor and gardening was quite significant. And what was very interesting for us was that what was happening was people were putting the classroom outside. And so children were having no space to just
a book area inside, outside.
Oh my goodness. And I kind of understood what people were thinking about with that. But for me, the learning outside was quite different. And so I remember one of the managers saying, in fact, it was Tina from Eastbury, saying, we've just spent half an hour just lying on the grass, looking at the clouds, talking about the clouds, and following the leaves and, blowing on the trees. And this is inner city, so we're not talking here about, fancy gardens. This is just, it's in Dagenham. But it was like, where is that space for children? Because the experience of outside is different. And that's why we wrote the book about gardening as well, because gardening isn't just a mud kitchen or, a little allotment piece or,
It often becomes bikes.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So gardening really was about understanding about seeds and growing and kindness and about digging things up and eating them and all of those things. But it was about using the nature and making dens in an old shrub and all of that sort of thing, rather than this idea of buying fancy stuff and putting it outside, or having, if you have bikes for the children, which we do, of course, and we get them from Bikeworks, which is a wonderful social enterprise that donates them to us. But then you feel, oh my gosh, now I have to make a road, or then I have to put the garage at the road, and I have to put some extra numbers on the bike. And that's, of course, a great thing to do, but it's not the be all and end all. And if the children are feeling quite full of emotion and energy and need, to go outside and just think differently and just experience the air around you and the space beneath your feet is just as important. Yes, is there any harm in actually saying to children, instead of having a fancy weather chart, where you sit them all around in a circle, because they spend too much time doing that, you sit them in a circle and say, what's the weather, what day is today, children? And so, really, it's like, go outside and feel it, and then come in and sit around and then tell me, how did it feel outside? Was it cold? Did your fingers shrivel up? Did you get rosiness in your cheeks? All of those things. And that becomes connection, I think, between the reality of outside and the learning from the inside. So, again, the point, I think, taking it back to pedagogy, is the bit about how do you know how children learn? How do you understand to teach them? And that takes some real confidence, I think. It does. And some bravery. That's why brave is one of our values, because you have to push against what Ben was alluding to earlier, which is the way we do things around here. Yeah. Oh, well, you have to do it that way.
We don't measure that. Yeah. We don't measure that.
No, yes,
that's we measure their reading. We measure their sight.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, can we do that? Oh, And as health and safety is about mitigating risk. It's not about giving into it. Nobody in health and safety says, ban conquers, don't climb, don't hide in a shrub, don't dig up things with your fingers. Just make sure they just say, make sure you scrub your nails afterwards. There's a lot of fear around that, and it's particularly evident in the outdoors.
Rather than supporting the children to protect themselves. Yeah. I suppose as well, going to the LEYF pedagogy, so we have the rope with the 7 strands. So in our pedagogy, again, your setting, we will have 8 strands or 4 strands, but we have 7. And Gina will go through these in another webinar at a later date. But
with you, Ben.
Oh,
with
great.
You, yeah.
Possibly. But in a way, when we talk about, it's how we lead learning. So, it does the question about how do we apply the pedagogy outside. That's the beauty of this pedagogy, is that it can be applied to city schools, rural schools, inside. We've got some nurseries that have no outdoor space whatsoever, so they take the children out on trips every day. Yeah. But this pedagogy works for every single nursery, and each of our nurseries is so different. The communities that they work with are different. The languages that the children speak are different.
The walls are all painted the same colour, though, because in our enabling environments, I don't like clutter or blue tack, but I'll tell you this, and I like cleanliness. It's about all the walls are painted clear. Even in my office, they're all painted the same. They're all gardenia and very neutral, because we like the idea of the children imposing themselves on the space rather than the space imposing them. Yeah. And a lot of adults don't actually understand that children like calm, and they don't like clutter, and they don't like what Londoners
psychedelic colours,
or a mural, as the Londoners call them. They're often what adults perceive. It's a bit like, you know, when you have a baby and your friends don't know what to buy, so they buy cuddly toys, and you end up with a cot full of cuddly toys. You don't know what to do with them. It's really about, you know, understanding the perspective, and you having the ability to be able to articulate, you know, this is why we do things. And we learned recently as well, there was we had a brew EY, so this is a new way of connecting with people, and you just go and have a drink with them. For tea. We had tea, but I think other people have something stronger. But we had tea because I wanted to serve cakes, and we had about 20. You have about 20 to 25 people, and it's just, you don't know who's going to come. It tends to be in your local neighborhood, so you get to actually know people who live in your neighborhood who are into this world. And we were having this conversation, and one of them that attended was from Rose House Montessori, and they very beautifully had described what they do when they go out in Southeast London to nature, as sort of nature school or nature walk. And we've been calling it the urban outdoors. So I said to them, if they don't mind, I'm also going to be calling it the nature walks and nature school, because for us, there's nature everywhere. You just have to find it. You know, even in a big, you know, in a big city like London, it's actually very green. And you might think, oh gosh, I haven't seen any bit of green for ages, but actually children find their way into these greens, don't they? And in fact, in one of our nurseries at the House of Commons, they haven't got any outdoor space, but the children go to the St. James's Park every day, and they've now got a little bit of ground there and an allotment, and they've got to know the park keeper. They probably do more going outside in some places, actually, with fancy gardens. So it is very interesting, this idea of the outdoor, your nature walk. And that, of course, fits with one of our other strands, which is our multi-generational one, which is about being part of the community, being out there, being recognized, understanding where the 507 bus goes, you know, looking up and seeing the Victorian heritage and indeed Georgian heritage by the shapes of the houses, all those kind of things, you know, popping into the local cafe, all those kind of things. When you're out,
but that's the thing about taking those children outside, and even our babies. So triple buggies are also great because they enable our baby rooms to take all of the babies outside. But you'll be amazed what the children notice. And that's what teachers often say. Why do we need to take them out? I don't, just walk around the block. But actually, it's what the children notice then brings into in terms of bringing that into your classroom. They might collect some leaves that they found interesting. A great nursery last week, they did the council were using the leaf blowers, and the children were just mesmerized up against the chain link fence watching the leaf blowers on the other side. So the teacher, it was fantastic, brought the children inside. They all used paper straws, not plastic, and they brought leaves in, and they did a leaf blowing competition. But by doing that, all the children were involved, and they measured on the table who could blow their leaf the furthest. What happened if you had two straws? What happened so that problem solving, that in the moment planning, it's just that kind of example. So if you don't take your children outside, you miss all of those opportunities to enrich what you're doing.
And what you just summed up there is the capability of your staff. So pedagogy and how we lead to learn is very much about the capability of the staff, the willingness of the staff, and the bravery of the staff to actually recognize the children's ability. And I think that's what, when Ofsted do come to look for you and to see you, when they talk about the learning walk, they really are just interested in how you really will know your children. You will be able to shape what they're saying. You'll be able to define and extend them, and you'll be able to describe all of that. And those kind of examples if I were an inspector, that's the kind of thing that would make my heart beat faster, because it would say that they're following that.
The 3 I's, and that again that's the third I, it's the impact. So your intention is how you view children. What is the point of education? That's why, like June said, that's one of the first things to sort out. The second I is your implementation, which is your pedagogy. Is how are you implementing and facilitating this learning? So we use our pedagogy. That's our implementation strategy. This is how we implement learning.
It's kind of like the process.
Definitely. We scaffold. We spiral around the child's interest. We very centered on relationships. And then the third one is the impact, and it's that how do you know it's successful? Are your children making progress? Did you even look at any of those questions? I did. We've got one last one because I know we're running out of time. How do you build teachers' confidence in understanding the pedagogy? That's a very important one. So for me and my team, it is the biggest challenge for us is about making it tangible. So it's about demonstrating, making them feel it. So for example, we talk about enabling environments is one of our areas of pedagogy. we have real fruits and vegetables in absolutely every home corner in all of our nurseries. And often people say, why, you know, it's a waste because they eat half of it and you can't use it the next day. But when we speak to our teachers and even our parents and we compare, you know, the learning
There's
outcome.
a real one.
Oh, there you go, yeah. But, you know, a plastic orange, it's so limited in what you can learn. A real orange, it's waxy, it's pitted, it's got a crater, it's got a spike, it's you know, it's got a pith, fantastic vocabulary. None of this is possible with a plastic orange.
Yeah, just feel it and smell it.
It's sour, it's bitter, it's juicy, it's sweet. And that's why we encourage our nursery teachers to take the children out to the local market to get the most peculiar fruits and vegetables they can find, bring them back to the nursery, let the children explore it. But for us, in terms of successfully getting our teachers to understand the pedagogy, it's about making it tangible, making it relatable to what they do every day. And the main thing for us, and I can't believe we haven't mentioned it, is pedagogical conversations. And it is not just with parents, it is getting our staff to talk to each other. So when we do action research, it's about them questioning, you know, looking at their environment, looking at their approach, looking at their children's progress and identifying areas that aren't working, things that they think they could improve, and not just randomly grabbing something off the shelf, but working together to reflect on it. Well, what can we try? How can we, and not being afraid, being brave to try it, have a go. You know, and I suppose the only other thing we do at LEYF is in terms of our training, we have, you know, we do apprenticeships all the way up to the LEYF degree. And the reason we do that is because we recognise it's not so much about the level of the qualification that the staff have, but it's about their ability to articulate what they're doing and why they're doing it, and to challenge it. Really, we love the fact that our teachers say why. Why do we do it this way? Why don't we do it that way?
Behave like a 4-year-old, really. But why?
Definitely. So I guess it comes down to that culture again, doesn't it?
Is there anything else there?
How does LEYF put research into action?
I think you probably answered that.
Yeah, we've got. I think if you look on our website, there's many research projects that we're doing. There's an awful lot more we're carrying out at the moment.
Yes, we really should do a whole webinar on action research because we're doing so many. It might be interesting to people, to be honest.
And also making people realise that everyone can do it. It's not something that people with PhDs need to do, especially in early years. You know. Praxeological paradigm.
That's absolutely praxeological paradigm. There you are, all the P's in our world. Pedagogy, praxeological paradigm, and
getting the people who matter to do it.
Yeah, exactly. Basically, it's been, you know, it's led by your teachers, and so it goes on, and with your children. They're very much part of the whole kind of praxis, really. So now we're finishing because we've been told we must finish on time, and so we are going to, because our director Steven Spielberg is over there in the background. So just to recap, what is pedagogy? Pedagogy is how we lead to learn. And what do you need to have to understand pedagogy? You need your values and your principles. You need to understand the theories of education and the purpose of it. You need to understand how children learn and develop, and you need to understand the view of your child so that you can teach the child and teach them appropriately. And really our advice to you, and this is what we do all the time, and you know, we're not perfect at this by any means, but you know, we're on it all the time. It's just keep talking about it, keep having your pedagogical conversations, but keep using the language. Don't be frightened by the language. And so to make it easier for you, we ask the children to sing for you all about their pedagogy. So hopefully that will be the last you'll hear of us, is the ringing tones of our lovely 3-year-olds from Stockwell Nursery telling you all about pedagogy. Thank you. So hopefully that will be the last.
There's a time loop delay. I think this is in the news where they pretend they're talking but don't.
Okay. Oh yes, very good. Yeah. Do this to me.
Pedagogy, that's what I do. That's the way I need to learn. That's what I do.
Well done, 3-year-olds.
Well done.